Hola a todo el mundo, me llamo Alex y bienvenidos a mi cuenta de YouTube. Hi everyone, my name is Alex and welcome back to my YouTube channel. En este video hoy vamos a aprender sobre los verbos reflexivos. In today's video we'll be learning about reflexive verbs. Entonces, ¿qué son los verbos reflexivos? What are reflexive verbs? So reflexive verbs are verbs that indicate that someone or something is doing something or performing an action towards or for themselves. So in English, we tend to recognise them as verbs that use the words myself, yourself, himself, herself, theirself. It's not hugely common in English because we don't tend to need to differentiate who you're doing the action to or for, but in Spanish they're used quite commonly. And that's what we will be exploring in today's video. Primero, el uso de los verbos reflexivos. So the use of reflexive verbs. So verbs in Spanish that end in se show us that they are reflexive verbs. For example, ducharse, which means to shower oneself, secarse, which means to dry oneself, comprarse, to buy oneself something. And it's the se at the end of the verb that makes it reflexive, and the se can be known as the reflexive pronoun. And these verbs tend to be used to describe something that you do or that it's for yourself. The most common times that we use reflexive verbs are when we're talking about daily routine. So it's things that we do to ourselves in our routine, such as we get ourselves up, we shower ourselves, we wash our hands, and also in emotion. So things, so like you make yourself happy, or like you don't make yourself happy, but it's like things make you happy, you make things happy. In Spanish they tend to be reflexive. For example, alegrarse, which means to make oneself happy, preocuparse means to worry oneself, and enfadarse means to make oneself angry. As I was saying before, reflexive verbs don't tend to be common in English, which means that when we translate them between Spanish and English, you don't need to translate them literally. For example, in English we don't say they bath themselves, they shower themselves. We can just say they have a shower, they have a bath. Whereas the other way round, it's really important that when you're translating from English to Spanish that you realise when a reflexive verb is used in English and translate it correctly to fit the way that reflexive verbs form in Spanish. But like I was just saying, when translating from Spanish into English, it's not necessarily important and it's not necessarily correct to literally and directly translate the reflexive verbs. ¿Cómo formar los verbos reflexivos? How do we form reflexive verbs? So like I was saying before, it's the se at the end of the infinitive verb, which lets us know that it's a reflexive verb. And this se just means oneself. So we have to change that depending on the person who the action is being done to or done for. So here is a list of how we change the se to suit and to be appropriate for the way that the verb's going to be conjugated, about who's it being done to, who's the verb being reflective on. So it's different for myself, yourself, herself, itself, himself, ourselves, themselves, and you, plural self. And something else we have to remember to do with reflexive verbs is that in the infinitive form, the se is at the end, so like ducharse, alegrarse, but when we conjugate it into a different person, we have to move the se or the reflexive pronoun to in front of the verb. So for example, ducharse is to shower oneself. So if I want to say that I shower myself, I say me ducho. So I've moved the reflexive pronoun in front of the verb, and then I've conjugated the verb in the present tense to appropriately fit the context of the sentence, I shower myself. So once we have moved or worked out who the appropriate person is, and we have moved the reflexive pronoun se to before the verb, we then have to appropriately conjugate the verb to one, fit the person that it's referring to, but also to be put in the right tense. So when we conjugate that verb, it just follows every other pattern of conjugation. It's the same if you want to conjugate it in the present tense, I shower myself. we just use the present tense endings. If you want to use it in the preterite, I showered myself, we then have to just conjugate it into the preterite tense endings. The way you conjugate the verb is the same as in any other context or situation. So, algunos ejemplos, some examples. In the present tense, I just said ducharse, which is to shower oneself. So in the present tense, I'm going to move that se from the end, put it in front, change it to me because I'm talking about that I'm showering myself. And I'm going to conjugate the duchar in the present tense I form, which ends in O. So me ducho, I shower myself. In the present tense, not the present tense, you've just done that. The preterite tense, which is one of the past tenses, I'm going to use the verb alegrarse, which means to make oneself happy. So again, we're going to move the se to in front of the verb, and I'm going to keep it in se because if you remember from the list about how to change each of the reflexive pronouns, se can mean él y ella, or ellos y ellas, so it can either mean he, she, it, or them. So that's what I want to use in the sentence. I want to say something about them, something about he, she, it. So I'm going to say se, and then we're going to conjugate the alegrar into the preterite tense. And the way the sentence goes, I want to, it has to match with the way that you have conjugated the se. So I've conjugated the se into se because I want to use it as he, she, it. Obviously, if you wanted to use it in the them conjugation, you'd have to then conjugate the verb into the them form, but right now I want to use it as the he, she, it. So I'm going to conjugate alegrar into alegro, which is the preterite he, she, it endings. So se alegró de encontrar su bolsa. He or she was really happy, they were really happy that they found their bag. Ahora tenéis algunos deberes. Now you guys have some homework. So on top of me, I'm going to put 3 sentences, and I want you guys to fill in the blanks with how you would make the reflexive verb of the verb that I'm going to give you in the sentence. The answers will be in the comments, but please try to not look at them and try and do them by yourself, and then mark them and correct them by looking in the answers once you have done them. Pues muchas gracias por ver mi video. Espero que hayas disfrutado y aprendido algo. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope you've learned something. Again, if you are unsure or have any questions, please put in the comments down below. But have a lovely rest of week, buen fin de semana, y hasta luego y adiós.